Welcome to our Blue Bin Recycling Refresher. My name is Ethan Hausman. I am Business Outreach for CSWD, and I am joined by a bit of a local celebrity, especially among the under 12 crowd, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Mace. I do the school outreach, also known as Recycle Rhonda, and I am here to be the wing lady tonight. So what we'll do is Ethan will go through some slides, talk about recycling here in Vermont or in our county at least. And then if you have any questions along the way, you can use at the bottom of your screen, you can use the Q&A box. I will be ladying that this evening. And so you can type in your answers. Some of them I will answer online, and some of them I will save and we'll discuss out loud so that everybody can hear the questions. So check the Q&A box. Like there's always like answers going on. So maybe somebody already asked a question similar to yours. So check that out. And that's all I got.
All right, we'll jump in. Are you seeing my screen, Rhonda?
I am.
Terrific. We will start by just introducing our organization. So CSWD, Chittenden Solid Waste District, represents the residents and businesses of Chittenden County. We are on long county lines, so all the towns in Chittenden County, with a member on our board of commissioners, a volunteer commissioner from each town, representing their community. So we are board governed. We are a municipality, so we do have local ordinance, as well as making sure that people are following state laws around waste management. And you see here that we have a range of facilities. We're talking a lot about the materials recovery facility, aka the MRF, but we also have our hazardous waste facility, the environmental depot, where you can bring paint and other hazardous wastes. Our drop-off centers are places where you can bring trash recycling, but they are also the hubs for our special recycling programs, and especially our Williston drop-off center. And then Green Mountain Compost is our organics diversion facility. And that facility is very busy these days with food scraps now being no longer allowed in the trash. We are processing about 5,000 tons a year of food scraps at GMC. We'd like to first frame this. We will certainly get into what's recyclable and why, but we like to first make sure we're all on the same page about the fact that there are many reasons to recycle. And the fact that it keeps the stuff out of the landfill is one of the obvious ones, but it's also worth pointing out that it creates a lot of jobs compared to the alternative of just landfill jobs. We also like to point out that we can all be doing better at keeping things that can be recycled or kept out of the landfill out of the trash. And so as you see, Chittenden County's numbers in 2019, 10% of what we were sending to Coventry is where the only operational landfill in Vermont is. 10% of that material was blue bin recyclables that could have been recycled. And as you see, there's a lot of other opportunity there too, including the organics, which is largely the food waste. So that's obviously why that's no longer allowed. And you'll see that slice getting smaller is the hope. And the reason why it is so problematic to be sending extra material to the landfill, trash is trash and it needs to go there, but the stuff that doesn't is making a 75-mile trip to be buried in the ground where it's going to sit there for decades and perhaps centuries. And our only landfill is in Coventry, and so it has a finite lifespan. Eventually it will be full, and it's not clear where the next landfill will be because nobody wants it in their backyard. So it is a precious commodity in that sense, landfill space. So when we talk about what's recyclable here in Vermont or in Chittenden County, we're talking about what we can handle at our materials recovery facility, our MRF. And that is our Williston facility that actually is staffed by Casella through a public-private partnership. And they're the ones who market material, find buyers for the recycled materials, because they control a lot of other MRF recycled materials. So there are economies of scale in them being able to work the markets, because our material is only about a ninth of what they have many other MRFs in the region. And what equipment we have in our MRF dictates what we can take. It's also about what we have markets for, but a lot of it is about what we can easily sort and sort efficiently. Here are some images from the MRF. You see the baled material ready to be marketed to, for example, a cardboard processor. You see the cardboard bales on the left. Those are human sorters on the container line, it looks like. So they are literally hand picking, different types of plastic and so forth. And then you see the paper, the mixed paper pile emerging on the right side before it is baled. And we will now show our video. It's a little old, but still relevant because most the equipment is the same.
Your blue bin. Think it's just another place to put your household waste? Think again. The things you put in this blue bin are actually valuable resources that are about to embark on an amazing journey we call recycling. This plastic bottle, when it falls into the bin, it's about to take a magic carpet ride to a new life. It could become another bottle or something like this fleece. This is the first stop on the journey, CSWD's Materials Recovery Facility, or MRF for short. Thanks to you, more than 80 million pounds of recyclables are processed in this building each year. They go through a wild series of spinning discs, speeding conveyor belts, whirling magnets. It's sort of like a Willy Wonka factory for recyclables. When they come out the other side, they're shipped off to market to be made into new products. Trucks come into this building. We call it the tip floor. That's because this is where trucks literally tip their recyclables out onto the floor. It can look like quite a mess, but that's only because the MRF hasn't worked its magic yet. Another machine, a skid steer or a loader, pushes it all onto the first conveyor belt, where it heads up the hill and into the pre-sort room. The pre-sort room is where the first line of workers take off bags of shredded paper for special handling. They also take out items that made it into your bin by mistake, like styrofoam, plastic bags, and hazardous materials. It takes concentration and quick hands, but it's important to get these contaminants out now. Contaminants lower the value of recyclables, and they can get caught into the machinery or even injure workers. Cardboard is the first material to be sorted. A screening machine with spinning discs pulls off big pieces of cardboard while everything else drops through it onto a conveyor below. After the cardboard, glass is next. Your recyclables go through something called a bottle breaker, which does exactly what it sounds like. It crushes glass into small pieces. That crushed glass falls through a screen onto its own special conveyor. The rest of your recyclables are still on the move. They're heading for 2 more sorting screens. We call paper, like newspaper and office paper, fibers. These items float on top of the screens, while containers, like plastic bottles and metal cans, bounce down the hill. The fibers head for a conveyor where workers pull out boxboard and cardboard for separate recycling. And they pull off any trash that might have sneaked by the first steps. The plastic and metal containers are headed for a special machine called a ballistic screen, whose rows of paddle arms weed out any leftover fibers and drop the containers onto their own conveyor. The workers on the next line are looking for plastic containers like jugs, tubs, and bottles. These plastics may end up as plastic or composite lumber, bottle caps, or even fleece sweaters. Each worker on this line is looking for a different type of plastic to sort, and each type of plastic needs to be kept separate. That's because every type of plastic is different. Companies that buy the kind of plastic used in water and soda bottles, for example, don't want other plastics. The color of the plastic can also make a difference. A colorless plastic milk jug is worth more because it can be made into more things than one that has been colored orange or blue. Next up, metal. Ferrous metals, or metals with iron in them, are in for a fun ride as they pass under a high-powered electromagnet, which lifts them off the conveyor and drops them down a chute into a bunker below. The last sorter on the line is looking for aluminum. aluminum cans, aluminum pipe hands, big balls of aluminum foil, and those products will be recycled into just about any other product you can think of made of aluminum. Aluminum siding, engine parts, or another aluminum can. After all the paper, plastics, and metal are sorted out, they're each baled into giant cubes that weigh up to 1,700 pounds apiece. These bales will be loaded onto tractor-trailer trucks and sold to companies that will recycle them into new products. These bales are worth a lot of money. Some are worth $30, some are worth more than $700. Each year, the MRF sells an average of $4 million worth of recyclables. But wait, we're not done yet. Remember that bottle breaker? Well, that broken glass took an exciting trip of its own past vacuums, fans, and magnets that picked out any paper, plastic, or metal bits that may have gotten mixed in. The glass then goes through a spinning cylinder called a trommel, and the end product is used in road building projects and in drainage projects. That's the end of this part of the amazing journey we call recycling. If you were a newspaper or a plastic bottle, your journey would have taken you only a half an hour from door to door. If you ever have a question about what you can recycle in Chittenden County, check out our A to Z list on cswd.net or give us a call at 872-8111. Thanks for joining us and your recyclables on this amazing journey. Remember, recycle right so the equipment and people at the MRF can do their job as effectively and safely as possible.
So I realized as we're watching the MRF video that I failed to define special recycling, and I think that that's relevant to the slide we're looking at now, because the other thing that's not mentioned on this slide that makes something blue bin recyclable is it also needs to be able to be collected safely and processed safely. And so that's an example of why batteries are a special recycling item that we would never want you to put in your blue bin, but we can take at our drop-off centers, most of our drop-off centers, for special recycling. So that's what special recycling is, the stuff that can be recycled, but can't be recycled in the blue bin, often for safety reasons or because it's hazardous. And then as we look at this slide, we're talking about other factors that make an item recyclable or not. So you got to be able to sort it. It has to be something that you can bale and move efficiently, which means that really dense, heavy materials are less cost efficient and therefore tend to be less recyclable. There has to be somebody interested in buying material to make new products. And in fact, for our needs, or Casella's as the market of our material, they really need 3 markets in order to be confident that something won't change overnight and all of a sudden we can no longer take that material and get it recycled. So we make sure there's some redundancy there in terms of three viable markets before we say that is a recyclable item. And then obviously the economics have to work. Processor buying the material because it's a reasonable or better than the cost, lower than the cost of using virgin raw material. And the economics have to include things like the sorting and certainly the transportation to get it to where it needs to go, because often this stuff is going far afield. Most of it is not going internationally. Most of it is staying domestic, or at least North America, I should say, because we do send some stuff to Canada. But it is not going overseas to China, for example, because China is no longer interested in taking our recyclables and was never taking much of what we here in the Northeast generated. They were only taking our paper because in most cases it was not efficient to send stuff as far as China. And then there has to be demand on the back end, whatever that stuff is made into, and sometimes that's high value applications, sometimes that's not as high value, what those uses are, but somebody has to pay for it and want it. And that of course is what covers the cost of somebody buying it and making those products. And we use that to point out that there are 2 ways that you can support recycling. One is by putting the right stuff in your bin. The other is by making sure that you're buying stuff made out of recycled materials as much as possible, because that demand side is really important. And then There are more than just the rules here, but we really want to emphasize that we are no longer sort of talking about all the opportunities for recycle, and instead are sort of talking about recycling more as an exclusive list that really boils down to paper and cardboard, and then single-use containers and packaging. But if that seems like a very narrow range of items, it is in some ways, but it really is all we want. We don't want durable items. If they're made from glass, they might have additives in them, and might behave unpredictably because they could be tempered glass or some exotic forms of glass. If it's plastic, durable plastics aren't you can't easily tell what they're made out of, what particular polymer it is. They may be also have special additives or special properties or be unusual blends. But single-use containers are easily sorted because they're standardized and because nobody's going to spend a lot of extra money making their containers so exotic that they're materials that you've never seen before in most cases. So like, an aluminum can is not going to have lots of other stuff in it, and the same goes for a plastic bottle. There is what we say is a squirrel's head here. You may know it as our 2-inch rule. So it needs to be 2 by 2, which includes, so a 2-inch diameter on like a cylindrical bottle counts, because if you think of crosshairs on the top of that bottle, you have the width and length or what have you, regardless of the height. But it does need to be 2 by 2. Obviously, no food residues. Going back to the question of demand and what has value and the economics work for, black plastic is an example of something that was a change made a number of years ago because it really impacted the marketability of our plastics. Processors just don't want black plastic because it's got fewer applications and are not willing to pay as much for it. And so we decided that it would make all our other plastics more viably recyclable to forgo the relatively small amount of black plastic that's in the stream. So
Just can I add like the revenues end of that for the black plastic? So when we were accepting that, we were putting it in our mixed plastic. It dropped the value by $200 a ton just for that. And again, it was a very small portion, but in order to run our MRF, we need to make the money to be able to run it. And so if we took black plastic out, we could gain $200 more a ton for our mixed plastic. It just seemed like the best decision. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you. That's good. And I'll just mention that $200 is a very significant portion of what we get for a ton of plastic. We don't get thousands of dollars for a ton of plastic. We get hundreds of dollars. And so to lose 200 because there's more black in there is not something that we could make work financially. So we covered size requirements. It needs to be single use. It really needs to be containers or single use containers for packaging, and cardboard, box board, paper. Just to illustrate what we're seeing at the MRF and what the stream is composed of, you can see that there's a lot of mixed paper and there's a lot of cardboard, basically a third and a third virtually, and then plastic is a relatively small proportion, and most of that plastic is drink bottles, like water bottles, soda bottles. That's the PET you see there. That is 3% of the overall material total. And you see that trash is also in there. That is not marketed, but that's the contamination that comes in with the stuff that we are able to recycle. And for those that are curious what sort of our categories are, we don't sort into every type of plastic, for example. We have a mixed plastic category, but we do separate a few of the particularly important and high value plastics. And you'll see that we do separate cardboard from mixed paper. And cardboard tends to have a lot more value because mixed paper tends to be much more full of unpredictable contaminants. And as you see, metal cans are divided into aluminum and steel and tin. So at this point, I'm going to kick it to you to at least reflect on which of the items that you're going to see in the next 2 slides you would put in your blue bin. And then we'll talk about why some of them should and should not go in there.
All right, hang on, before you go to that, just a couple of questions that might reflect on this.
Good. Yeah.
So both Rob and Nancy were asking about the acceptable sizes of caps. You did cover the size, nothing under 2 by 2 inches or nothing smaller than a squirrel's head. So hopefully that answered your question on that one. So no bottle caps, unless they are attached to the body of the bottle itself. So you can twist those caps back on nice and tight, pop that whole clean bottle into the recycle bin, that's fine. But no like willy-nilly caps all up in there because they're smaller than a squirrel's head. And I didn't know the answer to this, so maybe you do, Ethan. Can dryer sheet boxes be recycled? I'll be honest, I've never bought dryer sheets, so I don't even know what the boxes are like.
I don't know for sure. As far as I know, they can be recycled. I'm not aware of any coatings. I would say if they pass the rip test, then meaning they tear cleanly like paper would or boxboard, then go ahead and include them. I'm not aware of any special coatings or linings.
Yeah. Well, this person does say that they look to be coated inside. When in doubt, throw it out. That's your best option. But if you want to give it a rip and it easily tears, then that means it's all just like boxboard or, cardboard. But if it's like you can't tear it very easily, then it's probably coated with some sort of plastic or whatever. And just toss it in the trash. But if you're not sure, it's best to just put it in the trash. Or at least that's my opinion, Ethan.
Absolutely. Okay. If in doubt, put it in the trash. Yep.
All right. And Shannon asks, does paper have to follow the 2-inch rule?
You want me to take that? The paper, it's a great question. It does not need to follow the 2-inch rule, but there is a reality that small scraps of paper are not going to make it through the processing the way that we want them to. So we basically say that anything smaller than a quarter sheet is in danger of not processing the way we want it to and blowing, places that in with the plastic or what have you. So we'd suggest that we can talk about shredded paper as a separate thing, and small scraps can go in with the shredded paper, and we'll talk about what that entails. But you also could throw it all into a junk mail envelope, your small scraps, and then throw that envelope in. So you can kind of corral them that way. Be a couple of strategies for the small scraps of paper. It's a good question. Do you want to talk about shredded paper, Rhonda?
Yeah, because Shannon also said no shredded paper, ? So it's probably a good way to just scooch right into the shredded paper.
I was going to let you do that.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, you can recycle shredded paper. However, again, it can't be all loosey-goosey into your bin and flying all over the place. As much as we like to party, confetti shredded paper in the MRF it's a hot mess. So put your shredded paper and your smaller than a squirrel's head bits of paper into a clear plastic bag and tie it shut, knot it shut, and then you can put that it's the only time we'll accept any sort of plastic bag in the recycle bin. Then you can put it right on top of your recycling. And when it comes in to get sorted at the MRF, that's one of the first things that they'll look for is that clear plastic bag. And as long as they can see in and see that it's shredded paper, they'll pull it off, throw it to the side, and then that will get baled separately. And to be honest with you, shredded paper is a pretty high commodity at the MRF. It's one of the higher materials that we get.
And that's in part because office paper tends to be very clean, so not food contaminated, and it doesn't get messy on its journey because it's inside a plastic bag. And that speaks to how important it is to put only clean, no food residue in the bin, because you're going to contaminate other materials in there.
All right, let me just see if we've got. All right, I think we could go with the quiz for now, and I'm just going to answer some of these questions that are hanging out here.
Cool. Moving on to the quiz. So you have metal items here, 4 metal items: doorknob, clothes hanger, soda can, and bottle caps. So I'm hoping that everybody is going to get bottle caps correctly on this one, as we just talked about it. But which of these items would you be putting in your blue bin is the question. And then we'll move on to other types of materials. So you have a peanut butter jar, as peanut butter jars often come with peanut butter still stuck to the inside. That's a napkin underneath it. Then you have a water bottle. That's a reusable water bottle. A milk jug, a CFL light bulb, and some AA batteries. A pizza, like a freezer box for a frozen pizza, paper bag, and an egg carton. I should mention that's a paper egg carton. So if you want to think about which items you would not put in your blue bin and why, and which ones you would, and we're actually going to talk about the ones that we would not put in the blue bin just to reinforce why those are not recyclable, even though we might be tempted to. So backing up to the metal. We mentioned single-use containers and packaging. So the can is great. The other items are not containers and they're not packaging, except for maybe the caps. And as we talked about, those are going to be too small. So caps need to be attached to a container. And we're usually talking about plastic caps on plastic soda bottles in order to go through the system correctly. They basically ride along on their container. So that means that the can is the only thing that is blue bin recyclable here. The other metal items could be recycled as scrap metal, which is special recycling that you can do at most of our drop-off centers. And then some of you may have picked up on the fact that the water bottle, because it's reusable, is not recyclable in the way that a single-use, Dasani bottle would be. We're not going to be able to tell what kind of plastic that is, and it could be something exotic. The CFL bulb there's a special recycling program for that because that contains mercury. So we would definitely not want that getting busted on its journey to the MRF and leaking mercury everywhere. So please bring those to the drop-off centers that collect special recycling. And same goes to the battery. Those are both hazards in the blue bin. And batteries, especially lithium batteries, are causing MRF fires across the country literally every day. We have had several thermal incidents, meaning fires or close calls over the years, and batteries are usually the culprits. So that's really important. The peanut butter is a deal breaker, as you might have suspected. We don't want food contaminated stuff. The buyers don't want to be paying for extra weight that's a contaminant that's actually going to make things much harder for them to process. So your choices with a peanut butter jar are, well, if you know that it doesn't have I think it's xylitol that's very dangerous to dogs, but if you make sure that it's not going to be dangerous to dogs, you can have your dog do the job of cleaning it out. You can also just fill it with some water, maybe a little dish soap, leave it in your sink when you go to work. And then when you come home, put the lid on, give it a good strong shake, and you're going to be 90% of the way there. And you're just going to need to give it a quick rinse and you can go in your bin. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be willing to eat off it. Obviously, it just needs to be free of residues. So a little, grease film is not the end of the world, but we don't want it covered in peanut butter.
There was a question too that somebody had asked that I had answered typey wise about, like, does it have to be 100% clean? Preferably, yeah, but reality says it's not going to be. But also keep in mind when you watch that video that we have people that are hand sorting all of the containers. And think about that yogurt cup that's been sitting in the blue bin for 2 weeks in a hot July or August. It can get pretty nasty. And the smells that come out of the MRF shouldn't be that bad, but sometimes they are pretty rank because of, and this has to do with, not rinsing at all. But so the cleaner, the better. So preferably no food, no food stuck on it whatsoever would be the best.
You can imagine as the stuff goes down those conveyors, how much it gets jostled. And so if it's full of mold, those mold spores are going right into the workers' faces. It's also worth noting that we don't want rodents running around our MRF, and they are attracted to food residue. So for all those reasons, please don't. The best guidance that I've heard about how clean is clean enough is if you can recognize without the context of the container labeling and what the container looks like, but from the food residue, what it contained, that's too much residue. If you can just see that there was something in there, you're probably all right. But if you can tell that it was peanut butter, that's too much peanut butter left. Okay. So durable plastic water bottle, non-recyclable, mercury containing CFL, non-recyclable in the blue bin, and same goes for batteries. Peanut butter jar would need to be cleaned out. And the napkin, we don't suggest trying to recycle napkins or tissues or paper towels. First and foremost, because they are usually wet or dirty, but also because those softer papers have already, they're very short fibers used to make those, and they don't have a lot of life left to be made into new products because you need to have fiber length in order to make quality new fiber products, meaning paper, cardboard. So this slide is really just to try to address a lot of the things that we otherwise might not get to. And it admittedly, some of this is a little bit, you couldn't know necessarily that envelopes and windows are okay, but that a paper clip is going to be a deal breaker. But that is sort of the way it goes, is that a staple is fine enough that we can take that in paper and it's not a problem. But paper clips or the metal strips from hanging file folders, please don't try to recycle anything that contains that degree of metal. Let's see, what else do I want to cover? Oh, so small pill bottles are non-recyclable because their diameter is usually under 2 inches. So as I know that's frustrating for people who get a lot of medication, but those are a reuse opportunity perhaps, but not a blue bin recyclable unless they are the larger ones with 2-inch diameter. Anything that could be a tangler is going to be a real problem for us. And that includes clothing that can be recycled through Goodwill or special recycling, but will just get tangled in machinery. And that's the same thing that happens to plastic bags. So any kind of film plastic, meaning non-rigid, flip-floppy plastic, will get wrapped around the spinning machinery, and we don't want it in the blue bin. The one exception being if you put your shredded paper in it and it's clear, and so the workers can pull it off before it hits the machines, because they do scan that before it goes to the machinery. Foil covered paper is not easily processed by the people who buy our stuff. So if it's foil covered wrapping paper, for example, please don't try to recycle it. And then any kind of paper or cardboard or box board is usually what we're talking about that is in direct contact with food is non-recyclable. And that's because it will have an embedded lining of some kind, plastic or aluminum, whether or not you can perceive it. So examples, an ice cream pint seems like it's paper. It is a lot of paper, but there is a plastic lining in that, non-recyclable. The same would go for anything that you put in your freezer. If it's designed for direct contact with food, it's going to have some kind of a liner. But if it's a box into which there's like a plastic tray, and the plastic tray is what holds the food, and there's like a plastic covering over that, so that the food is not going to be in direct contact with the paper. That paper is almost certainly just paper without any linings and coatings. So this applies to ice cream pints, like juice cartons and milk cartons, and then also the broth cartons or coconut milk, which those have a very obvious aluminum lining if you open them up. So none of that stuff is recyclable. Yeah.
Can I give you some questions?
Yes.
I'm sorry, were you finished? I thought you were done.
I was just going to mention that the packing tape. So packing tape is another example. Something if you can pull off, we don't want packing tape getting wrapped around machinery. So if you got a long strand off your box, please pull it. And anything else you can pull really easily. But it's a contaminant that the processors are accustomed to and have learned how to accommodate pretty well. And so we don't ask that you get it free of packing tape. Just pull off the loose stuff and break down your cardboard and flatten it, please.
That was one of the questions that I was gonna, and then I responded, unless you have a sister like me who wraps their boxes in like gazillion times with tape, so you can't get into the box easily, then yes, please remove all of that tape before recycling it. So there's a couple of questions. Joan is asking, can we put tin cans inside of each other? And can we put plastic containers inside of each other?
That's a good question. And in theory, you can. I think there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. So for example, we sort our cans into the steel, tin, and then the aluminum. So if you don't know the difference between an aluminum can and a steel can, then we don't want you combining the two because we're not going to be able to sort them. And same with plastic. So in general, we prefer everything to be by itself, solo, but the cap is an example of how you can take an item that's non-recyclable because it's too small, and if it's going to ride on a larger item and wind up in the bale and going to where it needs to go because it's still attached to the bottle, it becomes recyclable that way. So one example about the cans that we would suggest is if you either leave the can lid attached when you open it, or if your lid is separate, put it back into the can and then crimp the can shut so the lid stays in there, because the lid is going to be the same material as the can, and that flat lid is less likely to wind up where it's supposed to go than the nice three-dimensional can that the machines are optimized to. So again, kind of like the lid, you can put the can lid inside, like the plastic bottle cap, you can put the can lid inside the can to get it where it needs to go. What else you got, Rhonda?
That was great, because that was like the next one was about the lids in the cans. All right. And Sally asks, do you need to rinse your beer and soda cans?
No, you don't need to rinse your beer and soda cans. We say that basically clear liquids, meaning they don't need to be totally clear, but liquids that don't leave like a viscous residue, a thick residue. So you need to rinse anything that had a smoothie in it or a milkshake. Please make sure your soda bottles are fully empty, but they don't need to be rinsed. Empty is enough for something like soda or beer. I'm seeing a question about coffee cups as well.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring this back to the carton example. Coffee cups, although they appear to be paper, they are paper. Paper does not hold coffee by itself. It has to have a plastic lining or some kind of other material embedded in it. And so for the same reason that you can't recycle an ice cream pint, you can't recycle a coffee cup.
Stephanie has a question about, do you have a buyer for black plastic now? It's going to be faster if I just answer this live than try to type, because I'm not very good at typing. It's no, we don't have a buyer for black plastic, but bigger problem is we don't have a way to sort that separately. And even another problem is that black plastic isn't one type of plastic. Black plastic can be a number 1, a number 2, a number 6. And because we sort based on the type of plastic, and that's all those codes mean, or all those numbers mean, and Ethan's going to talk about this in just a hot second, but those numbers on the bottom, it's not whether they can be recycled or not. It's basically a name tag for the plastic. So, like a number 1 plastic is like saying to you, like, hi, I'm polyethylene terephthalate. And number 2 is saying, hi, I'm high density polyethylene. It's really just name tags. And we sort into those types of plastics because they each have different chemistries and different physical properties. So black plastic is all types of plastic, and we don't have the time or the people power or the space to store it until we get enough that we can fill a whole tractor trailer truck. So black plastic is probably out for good. Sorry.
What else you got, Rhonda?
What about caps on glass containers?
I was trying to dodge that. It's a good question. So the thing about glass is that it's going to be fragmented in order so that it's heavy. And so we make it into small fragments that will fall through a screen into its own stream. And that's why small items are going to wind up in with the glass. And so that's why we don't want bottle caps by themselves. The qualifier here is that there is a magnet on the glass stream. So everything that falls in with the glass is going to pass underneath an electromagnet that will pull out ferrous metals, iron-containing metals that a magnet will pick up. But that means that the cap has to be ferrous metal. So we'd prefer you just maintain a can for scrap metal, you bring to the drop-off centers for all those kind of caps. But the reality is that you could put caps on glass, especially caps like on a pasta sauce jar where the cap will also meet the 2-inch rule. Because then the glass is going to get broken and that cap is still not even going to wind up in the glass at all. And so whether it's going to be picked up with a magnet doesn't matter. Hope that covers that. Again, we really encourage, metal is infinitely recyclable. And it has great value, meaning that it's always worth it to get it to where it needs to go to have somebody turn into new metal products. So scrap metal is really worth doing. And I know it's not as convenient because you can't put it in the blue bin, but there are so many metal items in our lives that we get rid of that can be recycled into new things. And all you got to do is bring them to a drop-off center and there's no charge. Beautiful.
And rolling into that, the foil from lids from like single yogurts, applesauces, fruit cups, those kinds of things, they can be recycled, but they have to be in a ball bigger than a squirrel's head. Or you can pop them into the scrap metal bucket and bring it on down to a drop-off center. I work with a lot of kids and they collect them, and usually you have like a class or 4 or 5 kids that are really into it, and they sit there and they take all of those little lids from the juicies at lunchtime and breakfast, and they make a giant ball out of it. And then they can pop that into the recycle bin and it'll get recycled as long as it's bigger than a squirrel's head or bigger than 2 inches in 2 directions. So yes, they can be, and it's worth it. If I run into that, I just put them in my like scrap metal here at home and then bring it on down for recycling. Can coffee filter go into, yes, Nancy, coffee filters can go into the food scraps. That's perfectly fine. What happens? Oh, so somebody wants to know what happens to the plastic that goes around the hay bales.
So if this person is talking about like ag film, agricultural film, like you would find around the large round bales, that there are special recycling programs for those agricultural films. They tend to be very hard to recycle because they're often dirty and there's a lot of like soil and debris, dust mixed in. We don't have a program for them, but I'm happy to talk to somebody about who they could talk to. Because there are programs, because farmers do generate a lot of that agricultural film.
So Susan is asking, so no, number 3, 4, 5, or 6.
So no, that's the wrong takeaway, Susan. Those other numbers are going into the mixed plastic. We're just pulling out a few types that we're separating and trying to maintain as purely that type of plastic, and then the rest is mixed. I'll save the caveat there for when we get into it later. But no, don't worry about the numbers. If it's a single-use container that meets the size requirements, is not black, and is not hazardous or food covered, it can go in regardless of number.
All right, and then there just one last one here before you move on, because I've got a couple of the egg carton ones. So yes, paper and plastic egg cartons are definitely recyclable.
And so that means we call the paper egg cartons molded fiber, where it looks like it's like little bits of paper that have all been molded together to make a shape. And you may find electronics and stuff. Manufacturers are often using that instead of styrofoam. Yay! They're using molded fiber inserts, and so those can go in the blue bin. Those are recyclable and will be good feedstock for cardboard.
Excellent. All right, we can move on. We've answered everything so far.
Awesome. Thank you.
You guys are asking some awesome sauce questions.
Yeah. So we often get a lot of questions about the recycling symbol, and we've already sort of started to touch on this. And our message to you is ignore the recycling symbol. And that's because it's not a recycling symbol. The people that put that on the bottle don't know what the technology and equipment is in our MRF. And that's what dictates what we can process. What they are trying to tell you is what the type of plastic that is made from. And so they took an ages-old symbol, and they decided that they'd put a number in it, and then that would make it clear that that's talking about the resin that the container is made from, and not the size of the container or anything about the product contents. It just makes it really clear that that's a code. It's a resin code. So the numbers that we sort out separately at the MRF are the 1s and 2s, but that's not to say we're not recycling the other numbers. We're just recycling them in a mixed bale, where the highest value stuff is probably the number 5s in those, but we're including many types of plastic. So again, we don't want you to use this as a recycling symbol or an indication of what can go in the recycling. There is plenty of stuff that will have a resin code because it is made from the right material, but that is in the wrong format to go through our blue bin system. The most obvious example being plastic bags. You will often find a number 2 like this on your plastic grocery bag, and yet we cannot process it because it will get tangled around our equipment. So, so please know that this is actually useful information if you were going to be putting a smaller plastic bottle inside a larger one, as we got the earlier question. You would definitely not want to do that unless you were confident that they were the same type of plastic, and this is how you would know. And so this is just a summary of what those numbers mean. So as we said, the PET or PETE, I won't even try to, polyethylene terephthalate. All right, I tried
Good
it.
job.
Thank you. That is a high value plastic and is around us everywhere. I think there was a question about plastic clamshells. Those are usually number 1. All the drink bottles, a lot of the stuff you're bringing home from the grocery store is in number 1 plastic. And as you saw, that's by far what we process the most of in terms of plastic. And then polyethylene, there are a couple different forms. There's low density and high density. And the high density is much more common in the products, single-use products that are coming to the MRF, and has great value. And then the polypropylene is the number 5 that is also a high value. But again, you don't need to worry about that. You just need to worry about whether or not it meets all the other requirements about putting it in your bin, and we'll figure out where it needs to go and what we can get for it to maximize our return. And then, the other point I'd like to make here is that number 7 is a catch-all. It's just an other category, which means that now even things that are made out of bioplastics, compostable things made out of plant resins have number 7 on them and are not recyclable. So number 7 is the only number that is a warning flag that you probably don't want to recycle it, or that it may be something that is not even true plastic.
Yeah, so if it says 7 PLA on it, that means it's made out of plants, so it can't go into the recycle bin.
Right. And we're gonna leave you, well, I'll put it right out there. Part of our agenda today is to make sure everyone knows how to recycle right these days and why it's important, but it's also to look ahead. And when we're going to be trying to build a new facility, our MRF is now quite dated and does not have the state-of-the-art technology that a lot of MRFs being built today do. And so we're planning a new MRF, and we'll be needing to go out to bond and get the support of our constituents when that time comes in a couple of years. So we wanted to let you know why that's important and what a new MRF will have in it that will make that a worthwhile investment. And so some of the stuff that we envy when we see it, that other municipalities have it in their MRFs, are optical sorting technology, special technology that's just like a magnet, but for aluminum. Obviously, aluminum does not contain iron, so a magnet will not pick it up, but an eddy current will use electromagnetic fields to eject the aluminum into its own pile. And then people often are concerned that all the jobs will disappear when we have all the automated equipment doing more. And we'd like to point out that that's not the case. It will allow us to reassign many more humans to be doing quality control. So they actually have much better purity, which will fetch a higher price, which will reduce the cost of recycling to you. So that's what we can look forward to. And so we have a bit of a video to show you what this looks like with optical sorting technology. Again, not our MRF, but we hope to have this probably several optical sorters in our next MRF soon. So you saw it in real time. Now slowed down, you can see that literally optical readers are individually assessing the materials. And then little jets of air are shooting them in different directions. Some stuff is just dropping, but the stuff that's being targeted is shooting off into the hopper. It looks like that is PET plastics.
Yeah.
Yep, and the HDPE, that milk jug, was not. So it's able to use density primarily to sort between types of plastic, which is pretty cool. Right now, one of the things, one of the obstacles for recycling is that sorters, the human sorters, are not going to have time to look at a number on the item, especially since even I can't sometimes read the tiny, tiny numbers. And so they have to use format. They have to say, it's a drink bottle, it's going to be a number 1. It's a clamshell, it's going to be a number 1. It's a milk jug or a laundry detergent bottle, that's going to be a number 2. And so that's an efficient way of sorting very quickly, but it's not perfectly accurate, of course, because there are exceptions. It's also why black is impossible for us to sort, because it just doesn't follow those rules in the same way. So when we can rely on technology to do that for us, that will mean much more reliable results and more purity in the materials.
Gosh, you gotta love some chemistry.
I don't know what that is.
Me neither.
Huh.
Well,
so that was supposed to be a video that was going to show you very much the same thing, but an eddy current. So it looks the same, but it's targeting aluminum only and shooting the aluminum off and not using jets of air. It's actually using the physics, the properties of the aluminum that resists the electromagnetic field. So want to leave you with this slide, which is all the ways that beyond just recycling right, you can do more to improve the planet, to be doing your part. And so we don't want, as we talked about, flip-floppy plastic, any kind of plastic film going in the blue bin, but it can be recycled through store take-back programs. So we've got a resource for you about that. And all of these resources are going to be in a resource list that we will send you in a follow-up email 2 days out. So was also a battery recycling resource. The locator is useful, although I can tell you that most of our drop-off centers are a great place to bring your batteries, no charge. And then the reducing junk mail links for both catalogs and junk mail in general are a great step to take, because there is a lot of that stuff. And that is certainly recyclable, but that kind of mixed paper is not a very high value material and is not going to go to great end use because it's a low grade.
and buy recycled stuff or stuff made out of recycled material.